Hi everyone, it's Esther. Welcome to Lesson 2. Hope you're having a good day. We need to learn more Canadian history, so let's get going. In this lesson, we're going to be working on page 15 and 16 of your Discover Canada guide. So follow along if you can. In this lesson, we're going to be learning about how the French and English Europeans developed colonies and fought for control of North America. Before we start, I want to review the English word colony because it appears in the guide quite a lot. A colony is a country or an area under the full or partial political control of another country, typically a distant one, and occupied by settlers from that country. So in the 1600s, Britain and France sent soldiers, missionaries, which were Christian religious men, and other people to live in the colonies in North America. These people were still British and French citizens. They were not independent Canadians or Americans yet. So in today's lesson, we're going to mainly work in the years 1600 to 1800. And at the end of the lesson, I'm going to have a nice timeline for you so you can see the dates and the names. So let's get started. We're going to first look at the colony called Royal New France, and you'll see that at the top of page 15 in your guide. In 1604, two French explorers, Pierre de Monts and Samuel de Champlain, made French colonies on the east coast of the USA and in Acadia, which is now Nova Scotia. After that, in 1608, de Champlain built a fortress in Quebec City. You can imagine that the weather was cold and harsh in the 1600s. They did not have the nice warm winter clothes and good materials that we have today to live comfortably. The explorers really did need to cooperate with the Aboriginal people, so the explorers joined their colonies with Aboriginal groups like the Algonquin, Montagnais, and Huron. The Iroquois people were enemies of these groups, but they later made peace with the French in 1701. The French and Aboriginal people made a lot of money together by catching animals for fur to sell to people in Europe. This was called the fur trade, and the most popular fur was beaver for making coats and hats. Leaders like Jean Talon, Count Frontenac, and Bishop Laval worked together to build a very successful French empire that covered a lot of North America. Up on the screen, you're going to see a map of North America because remember, the United States and Canada were not independent countries yet. The land was settled with French and British colonies. On page 15 of the guide, you see the words, "Struggle for a continent," and it shows that the British and French were struggling to control the land and the riches they were finding. A good example of this is the fur trade. In 1670, King Charles II of England gave all the rights to get furs to a company called the Hudson's Bay Company. Maybe you've heard of this company because it still exists in Canada today. This company could look for fur in all of the land and rivers surrounding the Hudson's Bay. And look at this map. It's a huge area of land. For the next 100 years, the British company competed with French fur trading companies. The French traders traveled by canoes and were called voyageurs, and you can see in the picture that they worked together with First Nations people. There were also coureurs des bois, who traveled long distances in the forests to trade supplies for furs. The English colonies all along the eastern coast of North America soon became richer and had more people than the colonies of New France. So Britain and France struggled for control of North America through the 1700s. In 1759, the British defeated the French in a battle called the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in Quebec City. This ended France's empire in America. The commanders of both armies, Brigadier James Wolfe and the Marquis de Montcalm, were killed. At the top of page 15, there is a photo of Pierre Le Moyne. He was a hero of New France and fought against the English. Following the battles, Britain renamed the French colony the province of Quebec. The French-speaking Catholic people continued to live there and were called habitants or Canadiens. They were trying to preserve their religion and culture in the new British Empire. In 1774, the British passed a special law called the Quebec Act, and this was to govern a province with people who had different religious traditions and legal traditions. Catholic people could hold public office, and they were able to restore French civil law while keeping British criminal law. This is a tradition that continues in Quebec today. Now we're going to learn a little bit about American history. The 13 British colonies that were south of Quebec in the current United States declared independence from Britain and formed the United States in 1776. On page 15 in your guide, we see the words United Empire Loyalists. These were more than 40,000 people who lived in the United States, but they felt loyal to Britain and they wanted to continue living in British colonies as British citizens. So they came north to settle in Nova Scotia and Quebec. At the top of page 15, we see a picture of a British man named Sir Guy Carleton. He was also called Lord Dorchester. He defeated an American invasion of Quebec and helped Loyalists come to Canada from the United States from 1782 and 1783. Loyalists had many different cultural backgrounds, not just British. For example, Joseph Brant led thousands of Loyalist Mohawk First Nations people into Canada. Loyalists were also Dutch, German, Scandinavian, and from a variety of Christian religions, as well as some Jews. Now we're going to look at a timeline for Lesson 2. We'll review some of those dates and names and places that we learned about in this lesson. Remembering back to the beginning of the lesson, we started our timeline in 1604 with French explorers Pierre de Monts and Samuel de Champlain establishing settlements on the east coast of North America. Then in 1608, de Champlain built a fortress in Quebec City. We learned in 1670 that King Charles II of England gave the trading rights to huge lands and waterways around Hudson's Bay to the Hudson's Bay Company. And we also know that through the 1700s, Britain and France fought for control of North America. But it all ended for France in 1759 with the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in Quebec City. The British Empire took over the areas of New France and named it Quebec. But Britain recognized the unique French culture and tried to find a way to accommodate the French living in Quebec with a policy called the Quebec Act in 1774. This was a time for a lot of change. Next on the timeline, we see 1776, a big year in the United States because this was when the 13 British colonies declared independence from Britain and became the United States. This is important for Canadian history because many loyalists to the British Crown moved to Canada at this time. Well, that was a lot of information. Remember, you can review and replay these lessons as much as you need to. So this is the end of lesson 2, and we'll see you in lesson 3.